Tala Tala Jibeda Number Jibege Tarbada Tam Jake the Bardu Jobra Jeba Tom Jake Sur Jibe Mon Gada Nampe Senjen Tom Jede Watan and Tumel under Nana Mepa Yan Tabra Zobe Chanjo Tobar Jo Nava Jibeta, Number Jibeke, Tarpada, Tom Jekembe, Bardu, Jabra, Jeba, Tom, Jeki, Sur, Jede, Ma, Nankada, Yampe, Sejen, Tom Jede, Wadan, Lana, Mepa, Yang Dabra, Suke, Chanjo, Rinpoche, Topra, Nova Jibeta, Number Jibeke, Tarbadam Tam Jagande Bardu Chopra Japa Tam Jagga So Jagga Mon Kadam Nampa Sanjay Tam Jagga Vadam Nalda Nurdo Dana Mataya Dabra Zobe Chanchu Rinpoche Do Pareja Soma Kiki Padu Luna Yisun Gavala Padu Luna Yisun Gavala Sunday Lema Santa Sanji Padu Luna Yisun Gavala Chodan Sanji Chodan Chanjo Padu Dane Kemsochi Dage Jinsu Gibe Sonan Kegolan Tenchi Sanje Gopasho Sanje Chodan Sange Chonan Chanchu Bardo Tani Kemsu Dage Jinsu Gibe Sonan La Tenchi Sanje Gopasho Sanje Chodan Sange Chonan Chanchu Bardo Tani Kemsu Dage Jinsu Gibe Sonan La Tenchi Sanje Gopasho Kadam Sanjay Tamjay Devan Deve Kudan Debra Kuchi Tumya Dan Dunya Ki Kudan Deva Kuchi Dunya Mebe Deva Tami Deva Kuchi Nini Chadam Vidan Deva Tamya Debra Kuchi Sanjay Tamjay Deva Deve Kudan Debra Kuchi Dunya Dunya Ki Kudan Deva Kuchi Dunya Mebe Deva Tami Deva Kuchi Nini Chadam Vidan Deva Tamya Debra Kuchi Sanjay Tamjay Deva Deva Kudan Debra Kuchi Dunya Dunya Ki Kudan Deva Kuchi Dunya Mebe Deva Tami Deva Kuchi Nini Chadam Vidan Deva Tamya Debra Kuchi All the worlds of the 10 directions reside Tathagatas of the 3 times. Before each of you lions among humans, I prostrate joyfully with body, speech, and mind. By the power of this aspiration to know deeds, all conquerors appear vividly in my mind. As many bodies as there are atoms in all lands, I prostrate to all you conquerors. In each atom, a Buddha numberless as atoms, all in the midst of the heirs of the Buddhas. Thus I conceive of this Dharma Dhatu as completely filled with you, conquerors in this way. With infinite oceans of praise and oceans of diverse melodies, I sing the excellent qualities of all you conquerors, and praise all of you gone to bliss with the best flowers and best garlands, best music, ointments, and excellent parasols, finest lamps and superior incense I offer to you conquerors. With excellent garments and best fragrances, and sandalwood powder heap high as Mount Meru, all wondrous offerings perfectly arranged I offer to you conquerors. These vast and unequal offerings to each and every one of you conquerors with the power of conviction and noble deeds, I prostrate and offer to all you conquerors. wonderful deeds that I have done with my body, speech, and mind under the power of desire, hatred, and ignorance. I confess each and every one of them. I rejoice in all the meritorious deeds and all congruous in the 10 directions and the heirs of the Buddhas. Solitary realizers, hearers still in training and beyond, and all wandering beings. You who are ends of the worlds of the 10 directions, who have unobstructedly attained Buddhahood through the stages of Bodhi. All you who are my protectors, please turn the unexhaled wheel of Dharma. With palms together, I earnestly beseech you who may intend to manifest final nirvana, please remain for as many eons as there are atoms in the world, for the happiness and well-being of all wandering beings, whatever slight virtue that may have been gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, are now dedicated to complete Bodhi. This ground sprinkled with scented waters and strewn with flowers, adorned with the supreme mountain and four continents, I visualize as a Buddha land and offer with. May all wandering beings experience such a pure land. The Gurus who possess the three kayas, I offer the outer, inner, secret, and thusness offerings with my body, wealth, and all phenomenal existence. Please grant the unsurpassed supreme attainment. Whatever slight virtue I may have gathered through prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting, and beseeching, I now dedicate it to all to complete Bodhi. Please turn the wheel of Dharma of the greater, lesser, and common vehicles in accordance with the dispositions and mental capacities of sentient beings. So we will continue with Bodhicharyavatara. Let's see. Yeah, so we are somewhere in that section where Shantideva is basically responding to doubts about this teaching on emptiness. So there were Buddhist communities in Shantideva's time that did not consider this teaching on emptiness to be something essential, or even to be something actually taught by the Buddha. Apparently, there were some in the Buddhist community rejected this teaching on emptiness. For these who reject the necessity of this teaching on emptiness, they say that what the Buddha taught, which we know as anicca, no, sorry, not anicca, anatta or anatman, which is atman in Sanskrit or atta in Pali, is referring to self. An is negation. So an-atman or an-atta, an-atta becomes anatta, an-atman becomes anatman. Literally translates to not or no, a negation, the an, and then atta or atman. And atman or atta is self. Now, this self is not the ordinary way that you and I, on a day-to-day basis, tend to use the term self, which is both you and I, day-to-day, we use the word self often simply as a way to refer to this self, like myself. Right? You can say that that is the commonsensical self. But in this expression, an-self, right? An-atman, an-atta, anatta, anatman, not self. The self here, so the word atman or atta in Sanskrit or in Pali is referring to something, you could say, spiritual. It's referring to something like an underlying, unchanging entity, an underlying, unchanging spirit, or even an underlying, unchanging, like soul, in which both our body and our mind belongs to this entity, this thing, this spiritual entity called Atman or Atta. It is that kind of self that the Buddha taught to not exist. So anatta or anatman. Now, of course, there are many different ways to further kind of refine what I just said about anatta. So then over time, different Buddhist groups use more and more, you could say, sophisticated, more and more refined ways to talk about the central teaching that the Buddha gave on anatta. But mainly, Buddha taught anatta as a way for us to see clearly the way things are. More importantly, the Buddha taught anatta because the Buddha says, when we look at our own person, so beginning with our own person, you say, who am I? What am I? So this I, right? So this I is not, the I that gets in a car, goes to the supermarket, buy a box of milk, come home, open the milk, drink. A few hours later, go to the toilet, pee. Not that I, but rather, the I that we wonder, who am I? What am I? What is this meaning? And what does this mean? That I. Buddha says, when you actually start asking that question, what will you find out? What will you see? Will you encounter anything here that you can call I, unchanging? The possessor, the owner of this body and mind. Can you find the owner? Buddha says, no, you cannot find such an owner. So the Buddha said, when you actually look, there isn't such a owner. There isn't such a boss that kind of lies behind all of this. That in fact, what is here is the temporary result of many, many factors physical factors, physical processes, mental factors, mental processes, coming together in a unique way, in a way you could say, in a unique way that gives rise to this person, that gives rise to the temporary existence of this person that has this feeling of I'm going to the store, I'm going to go to the market. Why did you say such nasty things about me? I feel hurt now. The Buddha says this I is merely something that temporarily arises as a feeling. Beyond that, there is no substantial, even though spiritual, but still substantial boss that lies behind all this bundle, skanda, bundle of factors. Now, although this temporary feeling of I certainly arises, you and I have experienced that, continue to experience that. So that sense, or even that kind of belief, oh yeah, of course there's an I. Although that feeling, the Buddha doesn't deny and say, yes, but we all have that. He says, but it becomes a problem when we exaggerate, or first we forget. We forget that this is a temporarily arising feeling. We forget that. Then, when we forget that, we exaggerate the concreteness, the realness, the substantialness of this I. That is when this I becomes the bearer of suffering. And that is when you could say we're now in samsara, in the cycle of birth and death. Antonio, can you tell me what was the last thing you heard?
I heard about when you said that this, I think that you were talking about the self being concrete and with a substance, and that was the cause of suffering.
Okay, yes. So then so briefly, then, so the Buddha doesn't deny that this temporary feeling that leads us to say, I am this, I am that, exist. He says it's when we forget the temporary and the composite nature of this experience, it's when we forget that, then we exaggerate that, so that from a commonsensical sense of self, it becomes a substantial self that then becomes the bearer of suffering, of disappointment, of dissatisfaction.
Okay. Could you give me, because I can't record, so can you give me a host?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah, you should have it now. Now, coming back to Shantideva's context, right? Those who object to the teaching on emptiness, what exactly are they objecting to? What they're objecting to is this. For those who object to the teachings of emptiness, what they're objecting to is, they say, as long as and as soon as we understand that basic, or that understanding of not self, anatta, anatman, that I just discussed, right? As long as you fully, thoroughly, deeply, and not just intellectually, like from the heart, right? You understand that. At that point, you are liberated. You become an arhat. Then, mission accomplished. But in the Mahayana teaching on emptiness, that teaching says, in fact, there is a gross level of understanding anatman and a subtle level. And the subtle level is the teaching on emptiness. So what the Mahayana tradition is saying is that basic understanding is a good start, but it doesn't go far enough, because it still leaves some subtle basis for suffering to arise. what the basic explanation or the basic understanding of Anatman does is it removes the gross levels of confusion, but there is a subtle level that can only be dispelled, be removed by understanding the Mahayana teachings on emptiness. Yeah, so the tradition that Shantideva represents, which we call Mahayana, says that there is the gross level, of understanding Anatman, and there is the subtle level of understanding Anatman. The gross level of understanding Anatman is Anatman with regards to persons. So the sense of person, I feel that I am a person, and then this I associated with this person. So I need to see how this I, in relation to this person, is an illusory thing. And if I can see through that, thoroughly understand that, then that is the gross realization. And so they say that is the emptiness of persons in Mahayana vocabulary. That is called penetrating, realizing the emptiness of persons. Then Mahayana says, but that will not liberate you. You need to also understand, realize completely the emptiness of phenomena. It's not an easy subject, but for our purposes, this phenomena is referring to, if persons, right, pertains to persons, as the word suggests, right? Phenomena then is talking about impersonal factors. That even those impersonal factors, those dharmas, those factors of existence, even they lack any self, any substantiality.
So go ahead and translate, and I'll try to give an example to illustrate what they're talking about here. So like this person called Han or Han Lai, right? So the gross level of realizing an Atman in relation to the person is me realizing, understanding, this Han that other people think of as Han, and this Han that I think of as Han. There's no substantiality to it. It's just a projection. If there is something that seems solid, seems unchanging, seems to permanently exist in this way or that way, that is an illusion. Because what's here is just again a bundle of physical and mental, emotional factors and processes. So that don't exist. That's the lack of self, lack of substantiality in relation to person. Now, in Shantideva's tradition, it says, but now I also need to have a more subtle realization, which is the realization, the understanding that even the factors, those temporarily arising factors that form part of that bundle, all those factors, they too lack any substantiality, any permanence. Which is sort of to say, okay, now that I don't anymore think about, oh, Han truly exists, I might still entertain ideas like, but one quality of that temporary Han is male, right? Male. But I might still think, oh, but maleness as a characteristic, oh, that's substantial, that's real. Asian, oh, that is real. Oh, that is irreducible. Dark hair or not much hair left, oh, that is irreducible. Tend to have a predisposition to be fat. Oh, that is irreducible. In Shantideva's tradition, which we call Mahayana, it says you need to also see how those factors that are part of that bundle, even those factors, they are interdependent. They cannot stand alone. That is called the emptiness of phenomena, as in phenomena too. These factors too do not lack, no, these factors too do not have substantiality, do not have permanence, do not exist independent. They exist interdependently. This is the Mahayana emphasis. This is what in our text here is called the teaching on emptiness. So in the stanzas, coming back to this, in those stanzas, that we recently covered, the objection to Mahayana is principally an objection to the Mahayana emphasis on emptiness. And that objection is raised from a few fronts. One front is to say, is those who reject says, we don't find this teaching in the sutras that we accept. And the sutras that we accept, you also accept, meaning Shantideva's people, you also accept. So since we don't find it in those sutras, and you find it in your special sutras, therefore, we have no reason to believe your sutras. So that was that objection. Then we saw how Shantideva handled that argument. Then, so that's one objection raised and one response that Shantideva gave to that. So we already looked at that. Then another kind of point of debate in those stanzas. I'm just going to summarize as best as I can instead of going through them in detail because I have no ability to go through them in detail. So another kind of set of arguments back and forth is Shantideva kind of, you could say, attacking. First is those who object to Shantideva attacking and saying the sutras that you based on your teaching on emptiness, those sutras, they are fake. I don't accept, right? Then Shantideva responds to that. Then after that, Shantideva kind of counter-attack. So Shantideva says, by the way, you say that the monks are the root of the Dharma. Then among these monks, you say the arhats are the greatest. It says, but then your arhats still have all these habitual flaws. How can you say your arhats are completely free from confusion when they still have these habitual flaws? So Shantideva challenged them like that. Yeah, so those who object to the Mahayana position, they will say, that although the arhats still are still under the influence of habitual tendencies, but they have no more craving. Craving being identified as, in the second noble truth, as the cause of suffering. Yeah. And so those who object to the teachings of emptiness basically say, we only rely on the Four Noble Truths. What is explicitly stated in the Four Noble Truths is that grasping, craving, thirst, thrishna, craving is the cause of suffering. Second Noble Truth. And arhats are those who have cut craving. They don't crave anymore. Despite that after they have cut craving, their habits, which has been formed from previous lifetimes, continue to operate and to play out. Shantideva says, how can that be? As long as these habit patterns are still at play, it shows that they are not free. And Shantideva says, why are they not free? Because although they have cut craving, which is the gross or the obvious cause of suffering, that craving has a cause, and that cause is ignorance. And Shantideva says, ignorance of what? Not knowing what? Not knowing the two types of selflessness, the two types of not-self, the two types of emptiness, which is the emptiness of persons and the emptiness of phenomena. In fact, Shantideva will say, even to become an arhat, it is necessary to realize both levels of not self, both levels of emptiness. There are some Mahayana traditions that say, oh, the difference between the Arhat realization and the complete Buddha realization, or the Shravaka Buddha realization, and the full and complete Samyak Buddha realization, is that the Shravaka Buddha realization is at the level of emptiness of, or not self of, persons. Whereas the enlightenment of a complete and full Buddha is the realization of the not self of persons, or emptiness of persons, and emptiness of phenomena. Shantideva says, no, no, no. Even just, which is this lower level of enlightenment called Arhat or Shravaka Buddha, even that, if they have not yet realized the emptiness of phenomena, then they are not even Arhats. Because Arhats are completely free from suffering. And if you still have habitual patterns controlling your actions, how is that liberated? That's not liberation. That's Shantideva's response. Shantideva poking holes in those who are debating him. Right? In fact, in Shantideva's explanation, of what makes Shravaka Buddhas and full and complete Buddhas different is not the level of wisdom. It's not the level of wisdom. It's the level of bodhicitta. What makes a complete and perfect Buddha is that at the cause level, at the beginning level, these individuals gave rise to bodhicitta and say, everything I do to get rid of grasping, to get rid of craving, to get rid of confusion, to develop all the skills, to develop all the qualities, I do all of this for the purpose of making myself most capable of liberating sentient beings. That bodhicitta is what separates complete Buddhists and Shravaka Arhat. So verse 47, it says that the last two lines, concepts linger still within their minds, and it is to these concepts that they cling. Specifically, concept, what concept? Concept that, the concepts surrounding the realness, the substantiality of phenomena, of dharmas. So it's saying, above this, it's saying, so maybe they have stopped your so-called arhats, those whom you believe are arhats. It says, yes, maybe they have stopped clinging to self, like the self of persons. But in the place of persons, now they have concepts, phenomena to cling to. As long as that still exists, they cannot be free. Then 48 says, the mind that has not realized voidness, emptiness, may be halted, may be temporarily kind of repressed, but will once again arise when conditions come. And the last line, therefore, one must train in understanding emptiness. And so merely realizing unatman, here it means merely realizing the emptiness of persons, is not sufficient to eradicate suffering. To eradicate suffering, you also have to stop, give up clinging to concepts, to phenomena. The next three verses here, 49, 50, 51. 49, 50, 51. Something like, if all the words recorded in the sutras you admit to be the Buddha's perfect speech. 49, 50, and 51. They are kind of, how should I say, hard to kind of make sense, you know, what is actually going on here. So much so that one of the oldest commentaries on Shantideva, an Indian commentary, not Tibetan, actually says these three verses, they were not originally composed by Shantideva. Somebody later added these three. And so, like in the Dalai Lama's teaching, when he taught this text one time, when he came to these next three, he says, they don't add much to the discussion here. So we don't need to talk about this. Let's move forward. So let's also move forward, you know. So we will take a short break now, so that those of you who want to read these three verses and think about it during the break, you can read these three verses and think about it. If you can give us some wisdom and insight, you know, then share with us, you know, later.
Om Wage Jore Mum Wage Jore 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 Om Wage Jore Mum Wage Jore
So now, stanza 52, Shantideva says, to linger and abide within samsara, free from every craving and from every fear, in order to achieve the good of those who ignorantly suffer, such is the fruit that emptiness will bear. So 52, in a way, he is answering one of the criticisms of this teaching of emptiness. See, there were also those who object to the teaching of emptiness by saying, this word emptiness, do you mean like nothing exists? Do you mean that nothing matters? Here, he says, actually, the real meaning of emptiness is when you understand emptiness. When you understand emptiness, even if you seem to linger and abide within samsara, from other people's point of view, you are in fact, because of your understanding of emptiness, you are already freed from all craving and all fear, so that now, doesn't matter where you are able to benefit beings. Such is the power of realizing emptiness. Such is the power of training in emptiness. So like the Heart Sutra says, realizing this teaching of emptiness, this perfection of wisdom, causes the great Bodhisattvas to go beyond fear. Right? So in the Heart Sutra, it says, right? Because your mind, your heart, no more confusion. No more confusion. Meaning, realizing the two types of emptiness. Then you go beyond fear. Right? 心无挂碍，无挂碍故，远离颠倒梦想。No, what was it? 心无挂碍，无挂碍故，无有恐怖。Right? So there's no more fear. So the way the Mahayana tradition understands samsara and nirvana is not that samsara and nirvana are two places. That as a confused sentient beings, you are confined to samsara. As an arhat, poof, you go somewhere else. But rather, here or there matters not anymore. Because you have this realization of emptiness, you can move through so-called samsara and no longer be affected by it. So there's a question, before Linda, before your question, there was another question that was sent to me. Shane had a question that said, so regarding this emptiness of self and phenomena, are those naturally occurring at the same time? It seems that the emptiness of self would be in itself the emptiness of phenomena. Yes, I think in a way, I think you are seeing some connection there. However, in terms of this debate that Shantideva is engaging in, or Shantideva responding to what he knows is some objections that his audience is raising in their minds, because there was never a real debate, right? It's not like Shantideva was literally debating anyone. He's just, in his mind, he knows his audience. You guys over there, I know what you're thinking. You object to this way. You guys over there, you object in this way. So within this context, there were those who will say, no. The Buddha only taught emptiness of persons or emptiness of self, emptiness of persons. The Buddha did not say anything further than that. In Shantideva's Mahayana tradition, Shantideva says, no, the Buddha taught both. And that is what we are talking about when we say emptiness. So at least in terms of the debate, they are not naturally occurring. As in, are these two emptinesses natural, meaning the way things are? Yes, of course. It's not that Mahayana people are creating a new emptiness. The Mahayana teachings is just saying there are degrees of realizing emptiness. And it's not enough to stay at the level of emptiness of persons, of self. It needs to go deeper than that to the level of emptiness of phenomena.
Dr. Lai, can you repeat the question again? Dr. Lai, can you hear me?
Can you repeat? I cannot hear. Is
Hello.
there a question? Yes.
Dr. Lai, can you repeat the question just now? I cannot hear you.
Oh, hold on. Thank you. Let me send you the message so you can translate more the question so that you can translate more easily. And Antonio, I will send you the question too, because you heard my response, so it's helpful for you to see the question. Then you can just summarize, yeah? Linda, go ahead.
So verse 52, could you say that's saying samsara and nirvana are two sides of the same hand?
Yes, you can say that. But here, what I want to point out so that everyone can appreciate this point is 52, the point is actually why it's there is Shantideva is still responding to some misunderstandings and some criticism on this teaching of emptiness. So he says, so he's essentially answering those who think that emptiness means nothingness. That, oh, we should just become nothing. And we should just realize nothing and poof, God. So there were some who object to this teaching of emptiness because they think it's nihilism. So Shantideva here points out, actually, not only is it not nihilism, but in fact, it is what makes it possible to be within, quote unquote, samsara and not be affected by samsara. And beyond, Shantideva answering, responding to silent objections that he knows to be going on in the original audience, right? We can see that in some ways, sometimes we have this wrong view about emptiness as well. And so this is the important part of how to take this chapter, which sounds like Shantideva is debating this person, that person, this Buddhist, that Buddhist, the Hinayana people, the mind-only people, this, that. Sometimes it's easy to kind of get lost in these rather esoteric, academic, philosophical debates. And yes, you can study Shantideva chapter 9 in this way. But more important than studying Shantideva in this way is to use Shantideva's seeming debate with other Buddhists as a light to shine on our own darkness, to shine on our own confusion and say, do I sometimes think this way? That, realizing emptiness means, I don't care about anyone anymore. And it's all empty. Doesn't matter. I cannot care anymore. It's all empty. We do sometimes, Sometimes we do it because we like to have that attitude. Sometimes we find ourselves feeling that way and we get depressed. Both are wrong understandings of emptiness. Using emptiness to say, no point caring about other people's suffering. It's not real in any case. Wrong view. You think you understand emptiness, then you don't feel good about it. It feels really depressed. Really empty. Wrong understanding. And instead of that kind of feeling or, you know, attitude, the true fruit of correctly understanding this teaching of emptiness can even allow you, so to say, to be in the middle of samsara and yet have no fear, no craving, not affected by it, and can be of benefit to others. Right? 53, therefore it is incorrect to find fault with this teaching on emptiness. And so with every doubt abandoned, we should meditate on that. Meditate here means we should cultivate. I think that's a better term. Meditation, this English word, might turn out to be the wrong word chosen by the English in the Victorian age when they first encountered Buddhist teachings. They chose the word meditation to translate bhavana. In Chinese, nothing to translate here. Don't have that problem. In English and Spanish, I think meditation was a bad word. Seems so passive, you know. Cultivate better. So it says, so we should cultivate this view, this understanding, this recognition. And by extension, in the Tibetan translation, we should habituate. We should make it a habit to view things this way, to understand things this way. Both of these words show that it's an active process. In the next stanza, I will read it. Afflictive passion and the veil upon cognition, the cure for their obscurity is emptiness. These first two lines. So here, Shantideva is explaining from his Mahayana tradition it is said that there are two types of ignorance or confusion. The first type is the kleshas, and they are the gross level. So there's what's here called the afflictive passion. Then there is the more subtle level of confusion, which is called the veil of cognition. And here cognition is referring to the Buddha's ability to see everything clearly with no obstacle. The kleshas, the afflictive passion, is what leads to the experience of suffering. So when we have kleshas, now, then we are afflicted by suffering. When we have the veil of cognition, this subtle obscuration, what is the problem with that? The problem with that is we lack the ability to effectively help others. So here again is a Mahayana emphasis. See, the non-Mahayana system says the only problem is klesha. This veil of cognition, not a problem. The real problem is just klesha. Here Shantideva said, no, no, no. So in a way, right, what is going on here is it will show the Mahayana emphasis on for the sake of all beings. In a way, the problem of klesha is a personal problem. The problem of the veil of cognition is the problem of not being able to care for others. So the Hinayana, meaning narrow, meaning personal, meaning limited way, is only concerned about our own problem. It's not necessarily bad, you know. Don't misunderstand. We're not saying the Hinayana focus is bad. It's limited. It's only concerned with my own stuff. So here Shantideva says, both of these we have to dispel. And we will dispel, we can dispel both of this with this wisdom of emptiness. Now, we have to be careful not to let this kind of expressions feed sectarian bias. Some of us might think, oh yeah, you know, those Theravada people, basically they're Hinayana. So they're not as altruistic as we, the Mahayana people. Then you have poisoned the Dharma. Buddha has no distinction like this. In fact, Kyoba says, you know, Buddha did not even come up with these terms, Hinayana, Mahayana. He says these terms, they are pointing to attitudes within each of us at different points in our kind of development, at different points in our life. Sometimes we really behave in the so-called Hinayana way. And sometimes, you know, we can have those Mahayana moments. Then most of the time, we don't even qualify to be in the Hinayana way, because we think the kleshas are so good, so wonderful. You know, oh, you don't have enough kleshas, you know. You should man up and be more arrogant. We celebrate kleshas. When we do that, you know, we're not even Hinayana, because we cannot even see the problem of klesha, which is most of the time, you know. So these, the real teachings in this chapter is not criticizing other people. It's using the context of debating other people ultimately to uproot all these tendencies and wrong view, misunderstanding that that each of us have. So this is not talking about those Buddhists over there, those Buddhists over there, those Buddhists who chant in this language, those Buddhists who believe in only one Buddha or three Buddhas or five or none. No, it's not about that. So don't turn this into that kind of sectarian bias. We all still here? Are we all still here? Yes, all here? Yes, okay. So here, I'll take the opportunity. So, founder of Jugungkagya, Kyopa Jitensukman, he says, these labels, Hinayana, Mahayana. Superficially, you can say, oh, this sutra is Hinayana, or this sutra is Mahayana. He says, that's not the real meaning. He says, the Buddha doesn't give teachings and say, oh, this is Hinayana, this is Mahayana. What the Buddha did teach is, Hinayana or Mahayana is referring to attitude and capacity. When our capacity is small and limited to only our own concern, our own welfare, that's Hinayana. When our capacity has grown bigger and has gone beyond the self, that is what we call Mahayana. So he says the real meaning of Hinayana, Mahayana, lesser and greater, is about one's capacity. And one's capacity can always be increased. One's scope of mind, broadness of view, is something that can always be increased and increased and increased. And so it's up to us whether we are Hinayana or Mahayana. It's up to us. Okay, so today we will stop here. And this Saturday we don't have class. And then next Tuesday we will have class. The Saturday class is a little hard for me to do now, because often on the weekends I have programs into the early evening, my time here in Malaysia, which is when we meet. So often it's a whole day of program, and frankly, yes, I will be free by class time, but physically present, mentally gone at that point. Then when that happens, the people who suffer the most are our generous translators, because they have to figure out what I'm saying, whereas I can just blah blah blah, and not make sense, but still sound good to myself. That's not hard to do, but let's not torture the translators. Okay, I just randomly saw a book that I have here in my parents' home that I left here. It's called, if you can see, maybe you cannot see so well, the camera is a little off, but the title of this book is Reflections from Emptiness. And it's the collected short teachings of a Thai forest monk. So here you have a Theravada tradition monk who you go through, this book, even though it doesn't have the technical vocabulary that Shantideva uses, but clearly what he is talking about here, no different from what Shantideva is teaching about emptiness. It's by Ajahn Anand, one of Bodhicharyavatara's students. One of his Thai students. In fact, the first page of this book, there is a quote, and this quote is the famous verse by the sixth patriarch Huineng, Fu Ti Ben Wu Shu. There is originally, there is no, Bodhi has no tree. So the famous verse that talks about emptiness. They actually quoted from that Zen Sutra in this book. Yay, Natalie found the book. And shared it in the chat. Thank you.
Tanchu Sem Cho Rinpoche Ma Kye Panam Kye Chi Kye Pan Yam Pan Ne Pan Om Ne Bo Sure. Okay, ta-ta everybody.
Thank you.
Gracias, Dr. Lee.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you,
Dr. La.
Adios, bye-bye.
Gracias,
Good
Dr.
night.
Lai.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Gracias, Antonio.
Gracias, Antonio.
No, sí.